Welcome to the Measured Pencil. I'm Stephen Murray, and I am here with pencil expert Wes Nelson.
Hello.
How you doing today, Wes?
The minute I turned 40, Stephen, my body, my life, my soul, it just broke immediately, like glass shattering upon the copper sphere of eternity. My will, my indomitable spirit just ceased and abruptly ended.
So we have a special guest with us here in studio today. Joining us...
It's a bonus.
Joining us today is Jake Whiteoak. He is a supply quality engineer, and he's going to talk to us today about how pencils are made. Welcome to the show, Jake.
That is correct. I do know how pencils are made.
Your experience is not directly with pencils, but you can look at a pencil that we've laid out a quiver or two in front of you, and you can see kind of the matrix, right?
Yeah, everything that's made, you can kind of separate into like different commodities. Commodities being extrusions, plastic injection, forgings, castings, machining, all your different kind of commodities. And when you look across these pens, you can see a couple common themes, right? Plastic bodies. You're not machining those out. You're going to want to do high volume, which means there's tooling involved.
Okay.
You're doing plastic injection.
Yeah.
Or some other, there's some other methods you can use to make high volume plastic pieces. And then you've got the other side of it where you've got metal bodies, which are probably going to be extrusion.
Yeah.
Meaning that you're actually creating some type of a die to make your shape and then pushing a round bar or even like a hexagonal bar through this die. It will come out at that shape.
Is that what a die is? Like a mold or something?
Yeah, so dies would be like your die is going to be something that creates the shape. And then as far as like plastic injection and stuff goes, you're actually going to have tooling, and that tooling will then be that shape, which you then inject plastic into.
Okay. But as far as metal is concerned?
Metals, you can have kind of the same type of tooling as plastic injection, but that would be like casting.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to be for heavier items. Wouldn't really make sense to pour liquid metal.
Okay.
That takes a lot of, energy and stuff like that. Versus you can actually just force with hydraulics, push metal through a die, and it creates that shape.
Oh, really?
Right.
Interesting.
Yep.
So in front of you right now, what is grabbing your attention as far as from your machinist perspective as something that just looks totally wonky and weird?
For me, I like the kind of metal bodied ones.
Yeah.
The plastic ones also have really good shapes, but I feel like metal knurling is kind of the best feeling.
Yeah.
It gives you grip. You can change. There's they actually measure it, I believe, in like kind of like a DPI kind of thing, and it's how many of these little diamond shapes are within like a square inch or smaller than that. So they'll kind of count it out and be like, this is a 336, knurl, and it creates that same. So you can actually design the types of style of knurls you want, and I really like the fact that it's kind of raw shaped metal, but it can feel really, really smooth.
Yeah.
Even though that it's a million jagged little edges.
How do they do that? How do they make those edges?
So literally on a lathe. So lathe meaning that you're actually spinning the item.
Okay.
And then the tool that looks for it kind of almost looks like something that would like dig into the earth, a bunch of teeth into it.
Oh,
but
really?
It's going to have a lot of teeth cut into it at that type of degree.
Yeah.
And then you just push it into it a certain amount. That creates your depth.
Yeah.
And your depth is going to create the feel of it, right? The deeper it is, the more it's going to start to grip and kind of be sharper. So you spin whatever you're trying to knurl, and then you'll run that die across it, and it will form that type of, almost like a design into it. You can control the knurl, and that's going to either give you grip or the sensitivity of how it feels, even kind of the look at it. Looking at this one's incredibly smooth, but you can see that the diamonds seem like they're a little bit bigger versus these are really fine and have a little bit more grit. Yeah, some of these are really smooth versus like this is kind of really grippy. This almost feels like a skateboard kind of deck kind of texture
deck tape.
to it.
Steve, what pencils was he just kind of highlighting there?
Right. For those of you at home who don't have the visual element, the smooth ones he's pointing to are the Enhan Carpenter's mechanical pencil.
Are these the same brand?
No, and then this is the Blick Premier mechanical pencil. We didn't like either of these because they were so smooth. Yeah. And then the one with the super knurling is one we haven't even done yet. That's the koh-i-noor Rapidomatic. So that's coming up, listeners. So one of the things we've been asking each other, and we have no experience, so we don't know, would it be possible to put knurling on a hexagonal barrel. From what you're describing with a lathing process, I'm going to guess no. But
ooh, interesting. I wouldn't say no. We don't have any examples of that, right? But it would probably create a little bit. It wouldn't be uniform because when it would be going over the edge, it would be less surface area. So the knurling would look different every time it went over the next edge.
Oh.
Also, with the part rotating, whatever was knurling, usually you're driving that in a very specific amount, just like when you lathe and you're going to say, I'm going to take 10 thousandths off. That's all the deeper it goes, and then you machine that entire surface. Well, as that part rotates, the flat part's going to be farther away from the knurling. So you would actually have to have the knurling be kind of like spring-fed. So maybe that would be kind of the challenge of it, because if you don't have the same amount of pressure when you're knurling, it actually will change it. Same thing with speed and feed. So when I say speed is how fast it's rotating, and then the feed would be how fast the knurling goes across it. And with your kind of hexagon shape, you need it to be at the same, same speed, same feed, and then the same pressure. And what you could do with the plastic ones is you could actually, within the tooling of it, you can actually put texture into the tooling. You can have parts that come out that are really shiny, and you can have parts that come out that are really dull. You can control that through the type of material you put in there and types of dye, but also the finish of the tooling that's being used is also directly related to how the part is going to come out at the end. If you want it to be really shiny, you actually just make that surface of a high surface finish, and that will make the part come out shiny. That makes the tool more expensive because there's more operations within that.
So I think you were pointing at the Caran d'Ache there with
yes, for the hexagonal barrel.
Potential knurling on that. Do you think that would add to that pencil? Because I think about that sometimes.
I think about it all the time.
Is that your Roman Empire, Stephen?
Well, I'm always keeping two things in the back of my head. Our tagline on our show description is the quest for the perfect pencil.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I hope we end up on. What would the measured pencil turn out looking like?
Holy shit. We just discovered the point of this podcast.
That, and I'm also always trying to think of creative ways to Frankenstein. Like, we haven't had a whole episode about Frankensteining stuff together.
Yeah.
Largely because most stuff doesn't go together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of always in the back of my head.
I wonder if that would actually add to the Caran d'Ache or not. The Caran d'Ache is that chartreuse one there in the end.
Okay.
And
it's our favorite.
It's like our favorite one.
I definitely love the color of it.
Yeah. But we just wonder about like adding knurling to that. I don't know. I don't think it needs it.
So are you guys, do you have a preference versus the pens that, have a type of rubber kind of insert on them, which then you can control, that type of texture? Do you think this would be better with knurling, or you would think you wouldn't like it as much if it had rubber on it?
Rubber, no. Absolutely not.
Definitely no rubber.
We draw a hard line in the sand, metal versus plastic. Metal is far superior in my mind. Stephen, I think you would agree.
I agree. And it has to be a really great rubber grip for me to even like not throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's only on pencils that are like budget pencils.
Yeah.
Kind of a little fun tidbit here. This thing says Swiss made on it. And you can kind of tell that this thing has pretty nice craftsmanship. There's actually a machining process called Swiss machining.
Oh, really?
And it was designed by the Swiss, which is really high tolerance, small part machine turning.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
So again, you got your lathes, you've got CNC machines. That's how you can create, almost anything from it. But when you want to mill or lathe something small, you can't put a ton of pressure into it. It's going to just deform it. So the Swiss actually designed a style of machining where they can produce very small parts that go into clocks and stuff like that, and watches.
Sure.
Those are all typically Swiss machining developed pieces, which means they're machined on Swiss equipment that has the capability of doing those things. If you go out and buy yourself a Mazak or any of the newer CNC equipment, it's meant for industrial use. You could make something that's a 1/4 of an inch big, but really then your envelope of how big that machine can open is really how big you can make. Swisses are the other way, where they're really designed where they're not meant to make big parts. They are designed to make repeatable processes to make really small, tiny parts.
Interesting. So that's the nuts and bolts or the unique characteristics of a Swiss-made
yeah.
process.
And you could even in some of these pens, like I said, the cheaper process of making some of these metal-bodied ones would definitely just be extrusion. You just buy rod and you just push metal through it.
Okay.
They might even start it as potentially tube and then forming it versus being like a solid body.
Yeah.
So it might start off as tube, pushed in, you get your sizes, you get your shapes. But if you wanted to make some of the kind of the articulate ones, now you're talking about trying to lathe this style of body. You wouldn't use a typical CNC machine. So this is...
He went right for the Rotring 600.
Yeah.
Which I actually pulled out too. I was going to have you...
This piece is really cool because you can actually see that you have the hexagonal body on it. And that was probably either machined or extruded to size, and then they turned down the end, and you can even see the chamfers. So it's not that these aren't
what's a chamfer?
So chamfer is when you bevel an edge.
Okay.
Because otherwise, every time you cut something or you end something, right, you're going to get a sharp edge.
Sure.
Mostly you want to break an edge, which is just a tiny break of it, or you put a chamfer on it and then you actually get that nice smooth round edge to something. So when you're creating equipment stuff, if you look at most stuff, almost everything's always beveled because a sharp edge nobody wants.
Oh, sure.
Sharp edges also cause points of brittleness and cracking.
Oh, okay.
Versus you round an edge, it can take more stress.
Interesting.
So it's cool to see the different kind of shapes in this. It looks like this might be the body is one piece, and then this potentially screws into it.
Yep, go ahead.
Exactly.
Oh, it does?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Nice. So this thing, I would say from a machining aspect, this thing is cool. This body is one piece. There's machining operations happening on this with these threads right here.
Yeah.
And it's all really nice. So you can see the surface of this is really nice. That means they didn't run it really fast. They ran a really high speed, but a really slow feed.
Oh, okay.
So that's as you're milling the material away, it's going to leave a really nice surface. And then also they might have done outside operations to these things where they get them zinc coated or painted or anodized for the different finishes. But you can kind of tell, like, I would say that these are probably produced with Swiss machining for these components. Yeah.
So the things you're talking about, the processes that take longer, that's playing into probably the price.
Right.
Those are those hidden things that when we look at a price on a pencil, we're like, why does it cost this much?
Right. And when I'm making one of these plastic bodies, I want to design tooling for it. So I say, all right, this is what I want this first tool to make. I want it to make this main body. That can be designed, and I'm going to say, well, how many do I want to make of these? I want to make 1 million a year.
Yeah.
Then you can start doing the time on it and say, all right, well, how long does it take to make these things? Well, these things can be injected pretty fast and then be ejected out. So I'll make the tool make 20 of these at a time.
Okay.
And if my turnaround rate is 30 seconds, well, now I know I can make 1 million of these a year.
Okay.
Right? What does it take to make 1 million of these a year? Well, if you have Swiss machining, that allows you to keep up with volume, but Swiss machines are not cheap.
Yeah.
The people that know how to use them correctly, it becomes kind of an art.
Yep.
So that's kind of the battle with machining shops is people that know how to do this type of fine machining versus other easier parts. They can be designed easier. You can set them up really easy and run them. But when you have kind of critical parts, well, that's where all the cost starts to build up, right? I can make 1 million of these really easy versus these metal things. There's actual also multiple operations here.
Yeah.
I can see that there's coloring, there's knurling, you've got your print on it, right? That's got to be lasered in or some type of inkjet kind of thing on it.
Yeah.
Those are all operations that come together. Then you've got this clip. That's got to be made. This is definitely spring steel, so some type of stamping operation.
Sure.
They might stamp a couple times, end with this. Deburr it, make it smooth, now send it outside operation to be anodized, painted. You're talking each one of these parts has multiple operation versus one of these plastic body ones. One operation creates this entire body and it's done. And every time the machine opens up, it ejects out 20 of these things.
Oh, right. So in your experience, do they start with a concept, right, for a part or a process or a machine or something like? Put your head into the mindset of like somebody who works at a Rotring. Do they look at cost first? What do they look at first?
Cost is always a thing. What should it be is what do we want to sell?
Okay.
What do we think is going to sell?
Yeah.
Right? We know we have a need I know the market for custom pens. and I want to do the research of how many do I think I can sell of these things.
Yeah.
That right there, that data will set you up. Okay, well, if I think I can only sell 1,000 of these things a year, and I look at how, if I'm a company that's been around, I know how much it costs to make things.
Yep.
So you build your estimates and you say, all right, I think this thing's going to cost me $10 to make. I can't sell it for more than 20. Well, that's not too bad. That's a 50% margin.
Yeah.
But some of these things where it becomes in these specialty ones where they only say, I'm only going to make 1,000 of them, they're probably not making great margins on them.
Okay.
So they'll make it as a set run.
Yeah.
Charge a little bit more for it, knowing that they're only going to make 1,000 of them.
Okay.
Right? Because if I can make high margins on something, I'll just make tons of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the cool thing about these ones is you can tell that the people who designed it kind of, there's heart into it.
Yeah.
It looks cool. So you get to design cool stuff. But then sometimes you have to design the economical stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can have fun doing that because you can now also figure out, well, how can I make this, right? They decided to make the clip be integrated into it.
Yep.
Well, designing to know that the clip will have just enough tension but not enough to break doesn't come easy. That's where R&D comes in, where, you know what, you might look in a book and read about how much plastic can bend and stuff, but you're just going to have to go for it.
Yeah, okay.
And then you're going to learn through time. You're like, oh, we really like to have our rib be this thickness. And if we use this type of HDPE plastic material, it has enough give for it works. And then someone's like, I want to pull money out of this. I want to make this thing out of ABS. And then the engineer says no.
Yeah.
Marketing says yes. You make it out of ABS, and then everyone complains, yeah, this pen was great, but the clip breaks all the time.
And when you say pull money, you mean make cheaper?
Correct.
Okay.
Every company has to make something.
Yeah.
Either got to make more money, sell more, or make things cheaper. You can make a lot more money by making things cheaper.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I design something new, I got to pay for R&D and stuff. You can also make a lot of money selling new things, for sure. But just like a big thing people always say, I don't like to buy cars when they're on their last generation because they've gone through 10 years of cost reduction.
Oh,
You got the same tool, and now you've been rebuilding it, or, oh, you know what? We don't really need that rib there.
Yeah.
That's 10% worth of material I don't have to pay for. When you got to make 10 million of them, that adds up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, why does this thing just not last as much as it used to? Well, someone did something to it. Someone changed a process, whether that was material or the different types of operations they do. It all leads into product quality for sure. So that's what's kind of interesting, seeing kind of the difference between these pens. I always kind of gravitate towards these metal ones because there's no way to... It's not that you can't mass produce these fast. That's not, but there's just multiple operations to it. This metal doesn't come out orange for what this pen is.
Yeah, that's the Rhodia.
So you've got your metal body. It kind of looks like the same as the previous one where it has that hexagonal shape to it, chamfered on the end. So you've got one piece here, you got another piece here in the back, you got your clicking mechanism, you've got your front cap, and they're all anodized orange. Each piece has to be machined, developed, and then anodized and then put together. It's just going to cost more versus I can get the color from plastic through the production of it.
No, it's not an extra step.
I don't have to send it out to be painted or dyed or whatever. Yeah. There's really big economical gains between the two. When I see the metal ones, then I just don't see them being the cheapest ones. But I can imagine if you mass produce it enough, and it is a simple metal body, then you can have a cheap metal pen. For sure.
How do they do the finish on that? Because it's got like this hairline.
Yeah, so that's actually from the extrusion process.
So that's not two. That's one process. Not they make it and then.
Yep. So they are pushing that metal shape through that die. It's creating this, and they're actually building in the texture to it. Or it could be that they run this through some type of a buffer, but since it's through the whole body, they might actually have it built into the assembly line of it, as in the machine that produces the main body then goes into a line, and then they all run through a buffer giving that texture. But I bet you they have the texture built into the die, just like you can build the texture into a plastic injection And if you don't care about that texture and you know you're going to buff it, well, then now your die gets cheaper because you just run the material through it. We're going to process the outside of it anyway. We don't care.
Right. But that's an extra step then.
That's an extra step.
Yeah.
So, but tooling wears out. So that's the other thing, right? So if I do a different operation, maybe I can control the texture to look a little bit nicer, more uniform versus if I have it built into the tooling. So those are all kinds of things that can be built out. And you're either going to know those from experience, or I might design pens and then I just might have a good relationship with manufacturers that I like to use. And then you utilize their knowledge of it and say, hey, this is what I want to do with this pen. What do you recommend? We want to die cast this. And how many are you going to make of this? 5,000. Like, we're not going to make you a die cast tool unless you make 110,000 of these things. Oh, okay, cool. I just found out that die casting tooling is very expensive, so I have to have quantity to utilize that, right?
Interesting.
So
that's why I can't, when I go like try to make personalized stuff for like an office.
Yeah.
And there's always that like price point, the price breaks.
Oh, exactly.
At like 500, they become $2 cheaper. At 1,000, they become
So any manufacturing process always wants to push out quantity, and the reason why they want to do that is because of setup costs.
Yeah.
If it takes me 8 hours to set up a machine, if I produce 1,000 of them versus I produce 10,000 of them, right? The setup time is the same, but how long did I run this for?
Sure.
And then also, if I make more of something, now I can get price breaks on the material. Like the price break thing just completely goes down the line, right?
Yeah.
And then if you don't have good price breaks, you don't have quantity, now you're kind of stuck to having to utilize the most common items out there, because that's where those price breaks come from. Like, you might like one type of material more than another one, but if you don't have the quantity and you want this thing to stay in cost, you're going to have to take the more cheaper aluminum because that's the one the mill makes the most of.
Sure.
And then you can utilize. So I've noticed a lot of these companies that are doing sticker, like, hey, give us your design, we'll make the buttons, we'll do the stickers.
Yeah.
Well, they're creating a business off of a really common item, and they gain those price breaks versus if you try to go out and do it yourself, you'll never be able to utilize that. So
at the same cost.
Right. You might have only ordered 100 buttons from them, but they ordered 1.2 million of them through a year.
Oh, sure.
Right. So that's just how it works for them.
Interesting.
So of all the pencils here, are you guessing then that the Rotrine has the most steps, the most cost associated with producing it?
Yeah, it definitely looks like the most complex pen out of the group, but it'd be hard to say, like, if you said, what do you think's the most expensive pen? Well, that's hard to know, right? Because I don't know which one. One of these plastic pens, which doesn't make them bad, might be a limited edition of something. And
right.
If they're not making a high quantity of it and it's custom engraved or something like that, then, totally, that one's going to be more expensive. But I definitely am kind of gravitating towards the metal. I like the knurl finish. It was really interesting of you saying between the really smooth finishes versus the ones that are a little more grippy. For my personal preference, I definitely like the grippy ones. I actually wish there was kind of something a little bit in between. This stuff is really gritty on the sharp ones.
It wears down.
And I would think it would kind of fatigue your fingers maybe, but it does also feel really good. So yeah, it just looks complex. I like the different operations within it. It looks very industrial, and I think that's what grabs my attention the most.
Looks very German industrial. That sounded a lot smarter in my head before it came out.
It is German.
Very German.
The Germans make great things.
Yeah, they do.
Cool. Well, Jake, thank you so much for coming in. We now know a lot more about the pencils that we talk about day in and day out, and we'll try to keep wrapping this in.
I'm going to just mansplain everything now. Like, I'm just going to take everything you said and pretend like it's all my knowledge now. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Catch us next week on The Measured Pencil.
This was The Measured Pencil with Wes Nelson and Stephen Murray. Theme song and additional music composed and performed by Josh Baumgartner. Additional production support by Two Desk Productions. If you want to see what the pencils look like, please follow us on Instagram at The Measured Pencil. If you'd like to share your pencil story, please record a short audio file, maybe 1 to 2 minutes, and email it to us at themeasuredpencil@gmail.com. Or, if you'd like us to review your favorite pencil, please email us with the name and it might appear on a future episode. Thanks for listening.